From the end of World War II till 2016, social psychologists in particular, and that's a rather dismal discipline, denied the existence of left-wing authoritarianism outright. It was only a right-wing phenomenon, apparently. You know, I mean, Stalin and Mao notwithstanding. But it started to switch a bit in 2016. We did a study in my lab, first of all, showing that left-wing authoritarianism was a coherent, you could identify a coherent set of beliefs statistically that were associated with so-called progressive causes allied with the willingness to impose them using force, fear, force, and compulsion. So that's not a bad definition of left-wing authoritarianism. But then a number of other studies have come out, and the most interesting ones concentrate on what's known as the dark tetrad. And the dark tetrad is a group of personality traits that were too evil to make it into the standard personality models. They were excluded by fiat to begin with. Manipulativeness, that's Machiavellianism. Psychopathy, which is predatory parasitism. Narcissism, that was the original dark triad. But that wasn't bad enough, so the psychologists had to add sadism to it to fill in the last quadrant. And the correlation between dark tetrad personality traits and left-wing authoritarianism is so high that it isn't obvious that they're distinguishable. I think, first of all, anybody who's willing to use fear and compulsion and force is likely to also be characterized by those dark tetrad traits. But I think the additional pathology that emerges on the left, and this is something we can discuss, obviously, is that you have to be a particular kind of evil snake to mask your psychopathic power-mongering in the guise of compassion. And I don't think the right-wing authoritarians do that. And this is something we actually don't know. You know, the Nazis were National Socialists, and their political stance was a weird mixture of what we would think of as left and right wing now, right? I mean, there was the fascist component that involved the aggregation of power at the pinnacle, corporate and governmental and media, all of that, right? So that seems kind of right wing and monolithic, but it wasn't like they were, it wasn't, there were socialist elements in the platform as well. And so we don't know enough to sort that out, I would say, maybe on the statistical side.
But doesn't all of this sort of point to the fact, or not even the fact, but my contention, that actually thinking in terms of left and right when it comes to this is kind of redundant? I think in a way you've sort of hit it.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
The debate has always been the struggle between liberty and authority. And so, you know, to go back to whether I'm left-wing or right-wing, I think I'm probably just liberal. I think there are liberal-minded people on the left, there are liberal-minded people on the right, among libertarians. It's not something that is tied to a left-right worldview. But when I hear people talking about how trying to frame the culture war in terms of left and right, or to say that the culture war doesn't matter and there are more important things, actually this struggle between liberty and authority, which John Stuart Mill talks about in his book on liberty, George Orwell has written about this, that's the thing that matters, and the recognition that there is an authoritarian impulse in humanity, that there is an enduring appeal to authoritarianism, whether you come from the left or from the right. This is something that George Orwell, to go back to him, he tackled this as well. It's precisely the reason why when he wrote Animal Farm, he couldn't get it published for so long, because people were horrified by the possibility that left-wing people could be authoritarian. And what he was saying is that this is something that doesn't, it's irrespective of a left-wing view or a right-wing view. And I think although you might be able to pinpoint psychological differences and tendencies among those on the left who have an authoritarian bent and those on the right who have a similar authoritarian bent, perhaps it's more useful just to think, particularly when it comes to the culture war, in terms of who believes in traditional liberal values. I know that means something very different in America, but liberal values insofar as individual autonomy, shared humanity, freedom of expression, freedom of the press, etc. Those kind of liberal values, you can do whatever you want with your life so long as it does not impinge upon the rights of others. That's something that left and right can agree on. And the social justice warriors, whilst they might call themselves left-wing, really their movement is characterized by authoritarianism. They oppose those liberal values.
That's what it looks like.
And quite, well, not just what it looks like, quite explicitly. I mean, the early critical race theory texts explicitly say, I mean, if you read Derek Bell, who wrote an essay called Who's Afraid of Critical Race Theory, he talks about how critical race theorists have always mistrusted liberalism. They see the liberal project as having failed. because we still live in a society where racism exists, and they take that as evidence that liberalism doesn't work, rather than
right, because the previous societies were so non-racist.
Right, exactly. They don't understand that point, that the social liberalism is about an ongoing process. It's about recognizing that we live in an imperfectible world and trying to do our best with a bad lot. And the problem is that authoritarians tend to be, as well, kind of utopians, even though in the case of the social justice activists, I don't think they've got a clear sense of what their final ideal society would look like. At the moment, they just seem to me to be on a sort of rampage of destruction. They've problematized.
Yeah, well, that is what it would look like.